Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Our Lady of Fatima podcast. I am your host, Terrence M. Stanton. It's a pleasure to be with you. This is being recorded on the evening of Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. Let's get right back into it. The exciting chapter 4 of The Secret Still Hidden by Christopher A. Ferrara, entitled Something is Missing. On June 26, 2000, after 40 years of growing pressure from the faithful, including such Fatimist organizations as Father Nicholas Gruner's Fatima Apostolate, the Vatican conducted a press conference to publish what it claimed is the entirety of the Third Secret. Conspicuously absent from the proceedings was the last surviving Fatima visionary. Sister Lucia was not even permitted to watch the internationally televised press conference on television. Sister Maria do Carmo, custodian of Sister Lucia's convent in Coimbra, told Corriere della Sera that we watch TV, but only in exceptional cases. The press conference on the Secret of Fatima is not such. This prompted Soci to ask, and what are these exceptional cases for the Carmelites of Coimbra? Perhaps the finals of the World Soccer Championship? Some 6 weeks earlier, then Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, had announced during the papal mass for the beatification of Jacinta and Francisco at Fatima that the secret would be published along with an appropriate commentary. The text of the purported secret, spanning 4 pages and 62 lines, was photostatically reproduced as part of a booklet containing that commentary entitled The Message of Fatima. Aside from the commentary, written by Cardinal Ratzinger, then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, or CDF, message included an introduction by then Archbishop Bertone, serving at that time as secretary for the CDF. According to message, the secret that had been suppressed and kept under absolute seal since it arrived at the Vatican in 1957 is nothing more than the following. The third part of the secret revealed at the Cova de Iria Fatima on 13 July 1917. I write in obedience to you, my God, who command me to do so through His Excellency, the Bishop of Leiria, and through your most holy mother and mine. After the 2 parts which I have already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand, flashing. It gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire, but they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it. A bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men, and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks, as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. Afflicted with pain and sorrow, he prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain on his knees, at the foot of the big cross he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way there died one after another the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the 2 arms of the cross there were 2 angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. Tui, 3/1/1994. 1944. That this vision is part of the Third Secret can hardly be doubted, but the worldwide reaction of the Catholic faithful to its disclosure can be summed up with a single incredulous question. That's it? Yes, the vision is dramatic, but its meaning is far from clear. An angel with a flaming sword? Flames from the sword threatening to set the world afire, but repelled, temporarily, by the Virgin? The angel thrice demanding penance from humanity? A bishop dressed in white, who seems to be the Pope, hobbling through a half-ruined city filled with corpses. What city? How ruined? The execution of the Pope by a band of soldiers. Who are they? As he kneels before a rough-hewn cross on a hill outside the city. Is it Rome? And then the martyrdom of countless bishops, priests, religious, and laity. Who? When? Where? as two other angels gather up the blood of the martyrs to sprinkle on heaven-bound souls. What does it all mean? The vision as published does not contain a single word from the Virgin by way of explanation, yet Our Lady had taken care to confirm for the seers the vision of hell they had clearly understood upon the very sight of it. You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. Message offered no explanation for the missing words of the Virgin, as if no one should be puzzled by this. But it defied belief that the Virgin had nothing to say about the dramatic but ambiguous content of the vision. Doubting questions immediately abounded. Where are the words of the Virgin, which are the logical continuation of her statement, "In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved," etc.? What is so terrible about this ambiguous vision that Sister Lucia could not commit it to paper without a direct intervention of the Virgin Mary? Where is the letter to the Bishop of Fatima, comprising some 25 lines of text? Given that Message stated that the text of the vision had been kept in the Holy Office archives, where is the text that was kept in the papal apartment under the Pope's personal custody during the reigns of Pius XII, John XXIII, and Paul VI? Why is the vision devoid of any reference to a crisis of faith in the Church and dramatic consequences for the world, alluded to by a train of witnesses who had either read the secret or had indirect knowledge of it? There is, on the face of it, no rational explanation for the Vatican's refusal to disclose the text of this vision in 1960, or the rigorous suppression of it for 40 years thereafter. Indeed, in his commentary on the secret in Message, the same Cardinal Ratzinger who said in 1984 that the secret is a religious prophecy concerning dangers to the faith and the life of the Christian and therefore of the world, was now saying that in the secret no great mystery is revealed, nor is the future unveiled. We see the Church of the Martyrs of the century which has just passed. If that were true, then why did Cardinal Ratzinger not simply say so back in 1984? As Portuguese Bishop Januario Torgal declared, if the Vatican knew it was not apocalyptic, why on earth did it make it public only now? What about 1960? Moreover, on its face, the vision has absolutely nothing to do with 1960, the year the secret was supposed to be revealed, because it would be more clear then. Evidently, in recognition of this problem, Cardinal Bertone claims in Message that during an unrecorded conversation with Sister Lucia at Coimbra on April 27, 2000, weeks before the press conference, she allegedly told him that the Virgin had never said anything about 1960. Before giving the sealed envelope containing the third part of the secret to the then Bishop of Leiria Fatima, Sister Lucia wrote on the outside envelope that it could be opened only after 1960, either by the Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Bishop of Leiria. Archbishop Bertone therefore asked, why only after 1960? Was it Our Lady who fixed that date? Sister Lucia replied, it was not Our Lady. I fixed the date because I had the intuition that before 1960 it would not be understood, but that only later would it be understood. Tellingly, Message fails to mention that on the envelope Sister Lucia had written, by express order of Our Lady, this envelope can only be opened in 1960. Nor does Message include a copy of the envelope as part of its supporting documentation. During the telecast of May 31, 2007, Bertone would finally reveal the envelope, or rather, two such envelopes, as we will see in Chapter 8. But on June 26, 2000, Bertone had the temerity to claim that Lucia declared to him in private weeks earlier, it was not Our Lady. I fixed the date. I say temerity because the Cardinal knew that his representation was flatly contradicted by what Lucia had written on the envelopes he had chosen not to reveal. One cannot overestimate the significance of what Bertone is claiming here. If the express order of Our Lady concerning revelation of the secret in 1960 was purely Sister Lucia's invention, if she had misled Canon Barthas, Cardinal Ottaviani, the Bishop of Fatima, the Cardinal Patriarch of Portugal, the whole Church, and the entire world, why should anyone believe anything she claimed to have heard from the Blessed Virgin? Why should anyone believe a single word of the message of Fatima? There are only two alternatives. Either Sister Lucia lied about this crucial matter throughout her life, which is inconceivable, or the words attributed to her by Bertone were not hers. In the latter case, Lucia's purported statement would be either an outright fabrication by Bertone, the product of undue influence upon the seer, or an utterance arising from a loss of mental capacity due to her advanced age. Here, in and of itself, is reason to doubt the entire official account, as Sochi does. To quote Sochi, "But Lucia would never have dared to establish herself a date to make it, the secret, known to everybody. Only the Madonna, who had imposed secrecy on the message, could do it." What about the telltale etc.? And what of the famous etc. in Sister Lucia's fourth memoir? To recall again Father Schweigel's testimony, the third secret includes the logical continuation of the Virgin's discourse following the phrase that ends with Sister Lucia's etc. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. In fact, the attention of Fatima scholars had always been focused on the etc. as the key to the third secret, since it was obvious that the Virgin's words to the seers had not trailed off in the middle of a thought. Yet, in a maneuver that has undermined all confidence in the official account, Message evades any discussion of the etc. by taking the text of the Message of Fatima from Sister Lucia's third memoir, where Our Lady's prophecy concerning Portugal does not appear, rather than the more complete fourth memoir. Like Message's attack on the credibility of the express order of Our Lady regarding 1960, this conspicuous avoidance of the fourth memoir could only engender suspicion. Why rely on the third memoir when the more complete fourth memoir was available? In his introduction, Bertone attempts to explain this curious behavior as follows. For the account of the first two parts of the secret, which have already been published and are therefore known, we have chosen the text written by Sister Lucia in the third memoir of 31 August 1941. Some annotations were added in the fourth memoir of 8 December 1941. Significantly, Bertone's introduction does not specify what is contained in these annotations, which is none other than the very phrase of the Virgin he had to know was at the heart of the entire controversy. According to Message, then, the only difference between the third and fourth memoirs is some annotations by Sister Lucia, the suggestion being that no one should think it amiss that the drafters of Message had chosen the former document, which was not cluttered by these annotations. The suggestion was less than honest, for as we saw in Chapter 2, the Virgin's words concerning the preservation of dogma in Portugal were manifestly not Lucia's annotations, but an integral part of the Fatima message, immediately after which Our Lady herself had said, "Tell this to no one. Yes, you may tell Francisco." Yet Bertone, having characterized the very words of the Virgin as annotations, buries her words in a footnote that Message never mentions. Again, so she calls attention to an evasive but extremely revealing comment by then Archbishop Bertone at the June 26 press conference. When asked about whether the etc. is indeed the beginning of the third secret, Bertone stated to the press, "It is difficult to say if it, the etc., refers to the second or the third part of the secret, i.e., the great secret of July 13, 1917. It seems to me that it pertains to the second. The implications are astonishing. Bertone does not deny that the etc. could in fact be part of the third secret, which would mean that the third secret includes the Virgin's spoken words. In a curious equivocation, Bertone states that it is difficult to say whether this is so, and that it seems to him that the etc. pertains to the second part of the Fatima message. It seems to him? Why would he not have determined the answer to this crucial question before the momentous Vatican presentation on June 26, given that he had a conversation with Sister Lucia concerning the content of the third secret only weeks before, on April 27, 2000, as his own introduction to Message reveals? Furthermore, even if it were the case that, as Bertone suggests, the etc. pertains only to the second secret, i.e. the part of the great secret that predicts World War II, the spread of Russia's errors throughout the world, and so forth, then it follows that the Vatican has yet to reveal the second secret in its entirety. Thus, no matter how it is viewed, Bertone's comment is a major blow to the credibility of the official account. So she asks the pertinent question, how can one elude that explosive beginning of the Virgin Mary as it were a marginal annotation? There is, writes Sochi, a clear sense of a great embarrassment before a phrase of the Madonna that one cannot succeed in explaining and that one tries to remove silently. Why the embarrassment? because, as Sochi and so many others have concluded, the etc. is the gateway to the missing words of the Virgin that complete the third secret of Fatima. Hence, the etc. must be downplayed and ignored if the gateway is to remain closed. A telling discrepancy. Bertone's introduction to Message contains another point that would prove to have decisive importance in this controversy. According to Bertone, John Paul II did not read the third secret until July 18, 1981, a full 3 years into his papacy, when the text of the secret was taken from the Holy Office archives and brought to him at Gemelli Hospital, where the Pope was recovering from the assassination attempt. But according to papal spokesman Joaquin Navarro Valls, as reported by the Washington Post, John Paul II read the third secret in 1978, within days of his election. There is no record, however, of any text of the secret being brought to John Paul from the Holy Office archives in that year. Thus, whatever text John Paul read in 1978 must have been located elsewhere, evidently in the papal apartment, as attested by the witnesses and photographs already cited. It is highly significant that neither Navarro Valls nor the Pope ever denied the report that the Pope had read the secret in 1978, even though, with explosive implications, that report flatly contradicted Bertone's own representations to the press. But it could hardly be the case that John Paul II, the very Pope who evinced a preoccupation with Fatima, would have waited until 3 years after his election to read the secret. This major discrepancy between the accounts of Bertone and Navarro Valls in itself indicates the existence of two distinct but related texts of the third secret. Cardinal Sodano's preventative interpretation. The credulity of the faithful was strained past the breaking point by what Sochi has called the preventative interpretation of the vision launched by Cardinal Sodano in May and June 2000. That is, an interpretation designed to prevent anyone from finding in the third secret what Sodano, Bertone, and others did not wish them to find. When Sodano announced at Fatima in May 2000 that the secret would soon be published, he suggested that it was nothing more than a prediction of events that had already come to pass, culminating in the 1981 attempt on the life of John Paul II. According to Sodano, the vision of Fatima concerns, above all, the war raged by atheist systems against the Church and Christians, and it describes the immense suffering endured by the witnesses to the faith in the last century of the second millennium. It is an interminable way of the cross led by the popes of the 20th century. According to the interpretation of the Little Shepherds, which was also recently confirmed by Sister Lucia, the bishop dressed in white who prays for all the faithful is the Pope, as he makes his way with great effort towards the cross amid the corpses of those who were martyred, bishops, priests, men and women religious, and many laypersons. He too falls to the ground, apparently dead under a burst of gunfire. After the assassination attempt of May 13, 1981, it appeared evident to His Holiness that it was a motherly hand which guided the bullet's path, enabling the dying Pope to halt at the threshold of death. The successive events of 1989 led, both in the Soviet Union and in a number of countries of Eastern Europe, to the fall of the communist regime which promoted atheism. For this too, His Holiness offers heartfelt thanks to the Most Holy Virgin. Even if the events to which the third part of the Secret of Fatima refers now seem part of the past, Our Lady's call to conversion and penance, issued at the beginning of the 20th century, remains timely and urgent today. In essence, Cardinal Sodano would reduce the third secret to the second secret, i.e., the second part of the Great Secret of July 13, 1917, which, as we saw in Chapter 1, predicted World War II, the spread of world communism, and the consequent persecution of the Church, the martyrdom of the faithful, and the suffering of the Holy Father. But if the third secret merely predicts the very events Our Lady had already predicted in the second secret, what is the point of the third secret? Why would Sister Lucia have found it so difficult to commit the third secret to paper? Why would Our Lady have refrained from directing Sister Lucia to write down the secret until 1944, after World War II and the spread of communism were already well underway? As for Sodano's claim that the Pope executed by soldiers outside a half-ruined city filled with bodies was John Paul II, it was manifest that Sodano had misled the public when he declared at Fatima the previous May that the Pope in the vision falls to the ground apparently dead under a burst of gunfire. In truth, the Pope in the vision was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him outside the half-ruined city. John Paul II, on the other hand, was not killed by a lone assassin during the attempt that took place in a perfectly intact St. Peter's Square. Any attempt on the life of a pope is a grave affair, and John Paul II had suffered greatly at the hands of his would-be assassin. Nevertheless, the pope had completely recovered from his wounds and resumed an active life that included skiing and hiking in the Italian Alps and swimming in the built-in pool he had installed at Castel Gandolfo shortly after his election. His physical condition after recovery was rightly described as impressive. The Pope's death a quarter century after the attempt resulted from the complications of Parkinson's disease, not the shot fired by Ali Agha in 1981. Moreover, why would Our Lady of Fatima give an express order to recall Sister Lucia's writing on the envelope that the secret be revealed in 1960 when that year had no relation to the 1981 assassination attempt or to any other particular in the vision? In short, the suggestion that John Paul II is the Pope in the vision is not merely a stretch, it is patently unbelievable. Sodano had blatantly twisted the content of the vision to suit his contrived interpretation. It should go without saying that Catholics are not required to accept Sodano's interpretation. As Cardinal Ratzinger stated during the June 26 press conference, it is not the intention of the Church to impose a single interpretation. Ratzinger's own commentary and message would speak only of attempting an interpretation, and ironically enough, Message's own supporting documentation demolishes Sodano's patently unsustainable construction. Bertone's introduction cites a purported letter from Sister Lucia to John Paul II in 1982 regarding the contents of the secret. Curiously, both the translation and the photo reproduction of the original handwriting appended to Message present only a fragment of the purported letter, without any address or salutation to the Pope or signature by Sister Lucia. The Pope is not mentioned even glancingly in the fragmentary text, and there is nothing about the fragment to indicate that it was meant for the Pope as opposed to anyone else. But here, in pertinent part, is what the fragment says. Since we did not heed this appeal of the Message, we see that it has been fulfilled. Russia has invaded the world with her errors, and if we have not yet seen the complete fulfillment of the final part of this prophecy, we are going towards it little by little with great strides. That is, in Message, the very document which argues that the vision of the bishop in white depicts the assassination attempt, Sister Lucia herself is quoted to the effect that fully a year after the attempt, we have not yet seen the complete fulfillment of the third secret. Furthermore, Sister Lucia makes no reference whatsoever to the attempt. As the fragment from the letter shows, the attempt was not even on Sister Lucia's radar in 1982, much less at the very center of her understanding of the secret. It must be noted that the Portuguese original of this strange epistolary fragment contains a phrase that negates any possibility it was addressed to John Paul II. The third part of the secret that you are so anxious to know is a symbolic revelation. It could not possibly be the case that in 1982 John Paul II was so anxious to know the third secret, because by all accounts, he had already read it by then. The words that you are so anxious to know reveal beyond doubt that the addressee of the purported 1982 letter was someone other than the Pope. But attention, the English and other translations of the fragment and Message all omit the words that you are so anxious to know, so that the phrase reads simply, the third part of the secret is a symbolic revelation, followed by the remainder of the sentence. No ellipses are used to indicate the omission, as honesty would require. The systematic excision of the key phrase from translation after translation could only be a calculated deception. It would require a Portuguese reader closely examining the photo-reproduced fragment to discover the ruse. We will hold up at that point and continue with Chapter 4 tomorrow. I would like to conclude by honoring the Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph with a couple of prayers. Please join me. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Prayer to Saint Joseph for a Soul in Purgatory, by Father Donald Calloway. Saint Joseph, reigning in heaven with Jesus and Mary, intercede for the souls in purgatory. Today in particular, I ask you to turn your gaze to the soul who is most forgotten in purgatory. This soul longs to see the face of God, O good Father. Ask the Holy Trinity to take this soul to the glory of heaven today. Remember me, Saint Joseph, when I die. I beg you to be prompt in delivering me from purgatory, so that I can see you, Jesus, and Mary face to face. Amen. Virgo potens, ora pro nobis, Sancti Joseph, terra daimonem, ora pro nobis, in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Thank you very kindly for listening to episode 61 of the Our Lady of Fatima podcast. I am your host, Terrence M. Stanton, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Goodbye, and God love you.